welcome, Willem and Chris. So stage is basically yours. So next hour or a bit less will be yours.
Thanks, Sammy. Hi, everyone. My name is Vil Dutia. I look after our Rubrik X focus in EMEA alongside Chris, and I'll give Chris a chance to introduce himself in just a moment. My background is that actually I worked within Rubrik for over 3 years, working with our probably most secure public sector customers in the UK. And during that time, what I found was that Rubrik was certainly providing innovative solutions in the data protection market, but there was a convergence coming of security and data protection. And that really got me excited about what we could do for customers to get more value out of the data that we were backing up. So I'm really excited to be able to share that journey with you today, and to be able to also, if we have some time, be able to share a demonstration by Chris, who's my colleague. Chris, do you want to introduce yourself?
Yeah, good morning, everyone. My name is Chris Beckett. I'm a systems engineer at Rubrik. I work with Vil. I'm in my second month at Rubrik. I joined from Checkpoint, where I worked in the cloud security team. So, security has been a big focus of mine for the last few years. And I'm looking forward to taking you through radar and sonar this morning.
Thanks, Chris. So, without any delay, and I certainly won't be mentioning Valtteri Bottas, and I won't be mentioning the Office of the Data Protection Officer in native Finnish. So I did try and pronounce that, but yeah, it wasn't very easy. So I thought I would start off really by talking about our journey with Rubrik. Now, when Rubrik came to market, one of the key things that we looked to do for customers was to modernize the backup and recovery challenge. I think what's really interesting is there's 3 or 4 things that we did very early in our capabilities with Rubrik that helped customers on that journey towards modernization and simplification of backup and recovery. The first was probably to have instant recovery. The second was to be cloud native. And the third to be API first, so being 100% RESTful API driven. And as we were doing that, and we've been doing that for around 6-7 years now, as we were building out that capability for customers and increasing our surface area, what we recognized was that customers were saying to us, backup and recovery is really my backstop, my last line of defense when it comes to security. And we realized that as an organization, where we were innovating, where our customers were driving us to, was 2 other key areas. So data security was the next area. And we built data security into the backup and recovery platform that I'll talk about a little bit today. But I'm also going to talk about how we help customers to converge or to bring together the security challenge and the recovery challenge, as well as looking at the landscape for the future with cloud and SaaS-based platforms. There's being one of the longest serving Rubrik employees in EMEA, there's a couple of accolades I would like to point out that I think are really that we're really proud of. The first one is, we've won a lot of VMworld Best of Show and awards, but the one that I think I'm most proud of, and that we'll talk about a product called Radar today, that won us the Data Protection and Security Gold Award at VMworld in 2018. The other one I think is very relevant for customers is the Gartner Magic Quadrant. So within 18 months of having a product to market, we were labeled as a visionary. And actually the following year, we were put into the leaders segment, and having the furthest, I would say the furthest to the right in that Magic Quadrant, which really means to customers that we were the most visionary vendor in that segment, gave some relevance and it gave some proof of where we were going and where we're coming from as a vendor. Now, I think what's really interesting is to look at the 3 use cases that customers talk to us most about. And I'll start with backup and recovery. So we can help as an organization, we can help you to back up your on-premise data center. We can help you to back up your cloud workloads. And what we realized very early on was that we needed to find a way to give customers a view of all of that data that we're protecting, and to give them a view that meant that they could look for compliance, but they could also apply global policies to different workloads, whether it was VMware, or whether it was an Azure VM, or whether it's an AWS VM or an Office 365 user. You may want to apply your gold, silver, or bronze policies to that data, but not manually managing that. So having that automation of the SLAs inside of our backup modernization use case capability was fundamental to how customers saw us moving towards cloud and helping to protect data elsewhere. But the key vision of Rubrik was to protect your data and have security built into the platform, but actually to get more value from the data. And the next thing I'm going to talk about is actually how we do that. So one of the other capabilities that we saw was that we have this unique capability to spot the trends in your data. So we know what a regular day looks like in your environment, because we're backing it up every hour, every 4 hours, every day. We're able to say, hey, this is normal in terms of growth, this is normal in terms of change rate, and this is normal in terms of seeing encryption in an environment, for example. So that gave us a unique capability from the backup data to be able to detect and provide an early detection of ransomware. So that's just one of the capabilities that we can detect, but also having that integrated into the backup platform meant that we were able to have this unique capability to detect and recover with one click. So being able to give customers that capability. Now, within the platform itself, it's the Rubrik backup platform, it's security first. But actually, we're not going to dig into a huge amount of detail in that part of the platform today. What I'm going to talk to you about is that next piece of value that we get from your data. And that comes in the data governance space. So across Europe, we have the GDPR standard, and in Finland, for example, we have the Office of the Data Commission Officer. We also have the same in the UK, the Information Commissioner's Office, and the various data protection authorities across each of the European countries. But that data governance landscape is changing, and the other capability that we have within the platform is to provide our Sonar tool, which gives you the ability to look for sensitive data. And that sensitive data might be credit card data, it might be personal identifiable information, it could be health records, it could be to do with, if you're a hospital, it could be to do with your patients, if you're a retailer, it could be to do with your customers. So I'm going to just start by moving forwards into the main aspect of cyber resilience and cyber recovery, and how data governance pulls together with cyber resilience and cyber recovery, because I think those two use cases are often within the same project inside our customers. But I think what's really interesting is that today we're seeing a lot of commentary from vendors in the security space saying that backup is your last line of defense. So ransomware is growing, malware is growing, and thick walls are not enough. But let's take a look at that. So one of the things that we see customers doing is to put many layers of defense, and we see backup as the vault in the bank. So if someone can breach the perimeter, if they can breach the network security, if they can breach the endpoint security and the application security, ultimately what the bad actors are trying to do is to get at your data. And the question really is, how do we secure that data, and can we secure that data? So when we look at what a lot of the security vendors in the market are saying and what their research is showing, we're actually seeing that ransomware is growing. But the average ransom paid by one of the reports by CrowdStrike just a couple of weeks ago was $1.1 million. I actually saw another report from Sophos only last few days that talks about $1.8 million for the total cost of a ransomware attack, and that includes recovery and people time. So what we're trying to do is to really help customers to secure that data, because if backup is your last line of defense, that means somebody has already jumped over the wall, broken through the back door, avoided the CCTV and got to the safe and probably cracked the code. So at that point, being able to secure that data, that's the most important asset of the business. So let's look at ransomware and how that actually impacts an organization. So if we look at what a typical ransomware attack looks like, we see that firstly, ransomware locks down the data. And the second step is often to see a ransom note being received. Now, the delay between the ransomware infecting the environment and the ransom note being received is actually shortening, but it typically has been around 200, maybe 180 days. So that's around 6 months. And the reason why ransomware locks down the data and then has a period of dormancy or a sleeping period is because they're waiting for your backups to expire. They're waiting for the capability of ransomware to lock down enough systems that it will paralyze the business, or it will stop the business from being operational, or be strong enough that they can demand that ransom that they're asking for. And again, that average figure from CrowdStrike was 1.1 million. So when that happens, customers have to attempt to recover, because that means that someone's got through all of the layers of defense. So what do? So we engage our SecOps team, our IT security team, and they will probably perform some forensics. They will look for, when did the ransomware attack happen? Which files did it impact? Can we actually go back and find that information? What tools do we have? And the next thing that we do is we engage IT operations, and we say, well, these systems are locked. What do? Can we restore from the backup? And if we can't restore from the backup, then I think we're down to option one, which is to pay that ransom. And what we are seeing is that a high proportion of customers that have been hit with ransomware, again, that Sophos report around ransomware last week is quite telling, but a high proportion of customers that are hit with ransomware pay the ransom, which in some countries is a criminal offense. In some countries, it's advised not to. But the most important thing is that customers who end up paying the ransom don't get all of their data back. And there's also double extortion. So even if they pay the ransom to get their systems back, often the criminals will threaten them again to publish that data. And I think the most famous one that I can remember over the last week was the Washington, D.C. police being attacked by Russian hackers, allegedly in the press. And they're now threatening to release data on police informants, which has huge impact to those people. However, if you do have backups that you can recover from, well, that's fantastic. So that means that I might not need to pay the ransom. But then the question is, what do I recover? And how long does it take to do that recovery if I have to go back to tape, or if I have to go back to an offsite disk repository and to figure out what is it that's been impacted? And often what happens is customers say, well, it's going to take me too long to recover, or to run the forensics to understand what I need to recover. So eventually the business either pays the ransom, or they have to recover weeks or months back of lots of systems, and lots of work is lost from their organization. We're seeing that it could take around 50 days as an average to actually understand what do we recover and how long does it take to recover. So customers don't want to be in that situation, even if they have backups and they're put on tape or whatever. So our approach is to save you from paying the ransom and save you from having compromised backups. So within Rubrik, we're able to help customers with a testable ransomware recovery plan. We provide enriched insights. So I mentioned our cyber resiliency use case. You'll see in a moment our capability called Rubrik Radar. That's the early detection engine that uses change rate and entropy and encryption analysis to understand, when did an encrypted file land in my organization's data set? When did I get hit with ransomware? And in fact, often those enriched insights from Rubrik Radar can help you from even avoiding waiting for that ransom note. So being able to detect that ransomware has locked down your data before it becomes prevalent. And maybe that gives you the ability to do more to prevent the spread of that, such as changing the credentials in your Active Directory or introducing multi-factor authentication, those kind of things. So what we tend to do at that point is to say, well, great, we can test the ransomware recovery plan. And I know there is a Q&A. I'm not going to ask you all to come off mute, but I would wonder if anyone has any questions at this point. Please do post them into the Q&A box. But I'm interested to know how many attendees we have here have actually tested their ransomware recovery plan, and how many of you do that every month? because I think what's really key is that we continue to test that regularly. So with Rubrik, effectively, you have safeguarded backups. So we have immutability within the backup platform. That means that backups cannot be changed, even by an administrator. We have a zero trust cluster design. We have multi-factor authentication. We have time-based one-time passwords, and effectively a very secure approach to backups. But Radar also gives you that ability to identify what to recover and how to recover quickly, and that single-click recovery. But we're going to tell you a little bit more about how that works in a moment. So let's go back to looking at that challenge. So if we do have a bad actor that's looking to get at that data, and I posed the question earlier, can we really secure at the point of data? And I think it's quite difficult to be able to secure the data without actually having the ability to recover from any issues that may occur to that data. And that's where backup comes in. So our approach is very much to start with the security first, immutability out of the box, and making sure that backups cannot be compromised. The next step is to use that anomalous data engine and the anomalous and encryption detection within our platform by looking at the backups and monitoring that system behavior and using machine learning to say, hey, I've just seen something abnormal in the environment, and being able to automate a recovery. And within that capability, of course, we have some API capability, which again, we'll come to in a moment. But the automated recovery is really important. That gives you as an organization the ability to know that your backups are safeguarded, have early detection of any issues, and then have a single click restore, which is a really powerful capability. But at that point, and because of GDPR, our customers are now asking, what data was involved in that event or that data breach? Who had access to it? And what are they doing with that access? And on top of that, we have this growing regulatory landscape that says that if I do get hit with a ransomware attack, I have 72 hours, 3 days, to report to the Data Protection Authority. So in Finland, I believe that's the Office of the Data Protection Officer. The 72-hour window is to report exactly whose data was compromised, whose data was lost, which individual's data was lost, and being able to report to those individuals that you have lost that data, and to be able to inform them what steps they need to take to remediate or to protect themselves. So if it was credit card data that was lost, or maybe it was genetic data or healthcare data, that's something that often you lose a lot of customer trust around. So it's pretty important if you are holding personal data or sensitive data, or if you're a retail organization and holding credit card data, which you probably shouldn't, then being able to understand where that data is, who has access, and what are they doing is a real challenge, especially during a ransomware event. So we're seeing that as the data grows, particularly in unstructured data, and the number of attacks is increasing, and that impacts the risk and the productivity of our customers, we also see this growing landscape of regulations. So it's not just GDPR that we need to be concerned with. If you're a university and you have a Brazilian student coming to the university and you're keeping their passport details there, well, you need to be concerned with LGPD, which is the Brazilian data protection standard, because you're holding sensitive data under a different data authority. And the same goes across GDPR. So if you do have fleet drivers driving your vehicles, you might be a utility company and having lots of drivers. Maybe you have someone on a Dutch driving license. Well, you probably capture that data because you need it for your insurance. Well, now you're being regulated and need to be responsible for that data that you're holding. So we asked the question, and our customers asked us, what if you could look at the data when we protect it, classify it, report on access and usage, but actually being able to do that at the point of backup? So effectively what Rubrik does is to be able to not just back up the data, but then being able to understand what's within the data. And let's tell you how we do that. So firstly, we have automated indexing and metadata tagging on the existing backup data. So we're indexing everything as we take a backup. But to be able to index it doesn't mean that you can search within that data. However, we recognize that when we're taking the backups, and once we've finished taking a backup, we have the ability to automatically classify that data. And there are growing data protection regulations. There are growing concerns of our customers. But the three reasons that we see customers wanting to do this, the first one is ransomware. So what data has been exposed in a data exfiltration based attack? So if a criminal organization is holding down your systems at ransom, but also threatening to publish that data, you need to know which data was involved. The second piece is around access control. So if you do have sensitive data, and maybe you have that in your finance systems or your human resources systems, you certainly don't want that getting leaked into systems that have open access or into the department file share. So making sure that you're able to control who has access and to monitor that proactively is really powerful. And then having an automated inventory. So as an example for PCI DSS compliance, which is for any organization that's processing credit card transactions, maybe you externally outsource your payment protection engine, but you might provide that organization with a virtual machine to host that system on for your canteen or for your for your bookshop or for a website engine where you're taking credit card details. You need to make sure that you're not caching that data and being responsible for it. So there's this growing landscape where we're really trying to become proactive in our inventory of it. So what's the traditional approach? Traditionally, customers would find that they would run client software and scripts in their front-end systems to be able to continuously scan that environment for data classification or for sensitive data. What we recognized was that there's a huge overhead in infrastructure to constantly scan the systems to understand if there is personally identifiable data or sensitive data within those systems. It takes a lot of people time and a lot of resources to manage that, to keep those agents updated that are running in the virtual machines or in the physical systems. It takes a lot of infrastructure teams' time and resources to continually keep the compatibility up to date as well. And then you've got to manage a server, you've got to have a database to be able to search for that data and constantly updating. So we recognize that we have this powerful capability within the backups to take away all of that resource strain from our customers. So as that data scales, and the unstructured data is where we see it mostly scaling, we're able to protect that data, spot anomalous events, but also scale that data classification engine as we're taking the backups. So as you're scaling your backups, you're able to do that with Rubrik. So effectively, when we're not taking backups, when our platform is in downtime, so outside of your backup window, it's processing the data. So it's getting more value out of the infrastructure that you have for backup. So what are the two key use cases I talked about? Well, IT operations first. What we're seeing is that having a simple engine that requires no training and is able to be implemented for backup modernization that automates this policy-based engine is great, but then being able to provide insights and enriched data for customers based on the backup trends, and then being able to spot where that sensitive data is really powerful. So we have GPS, which gives you a global view of your data. We have radar, which gives you the ransomware detection and recovery, and sonar, which gives you that sensitive data discovery. And one of the other things that we are building is something called app flows, and app flows is this capability to have DR runbooks. So when we look at disaster recovery, we're finding that ransomware is the new disaster recovery invocation. So no longer is the fire in the data center the problem. It's not likely that you're going to get a fire in the data center. It's probably more likely that you would have a ransomware event and you would have to roll back. So being able to build that into one platform for infrastructure teams is really powerful. But then what we found is that our integration through our API capability enables customers to alert these events from radar and ransomware events into a SIEM tool or even into a SOAR. So a SOAR is the capability to not just be able to alert, but actually create events and reactions from within your security team without having to log into Rubrik and to be able to look at the backup interface. You can create a playbook and execute a playbook that says, I've had a ransomware attack. I want to execute a one-click recovery with Rubrik Radar. I want to report from Sonar exactly which data was impacted, and maybe I want to shut a firewall rule or change my Active Directory configuration around a particular user group whose credentials may have been stolen by the Ryuk ransomware. So I'm going to start wrapping up now and hand across to Chris for the demonstration. But I think what's really powerful here is to just talk about what our customers tell us is a really powerful capability, particularly for security and compliance teams, and even more so where we have mid-sized organizations that don't have dedicated security teams to look at this data, but actually have maybe 1 or 2 people that are wearing a security hat as well as something else in the infrastructure team or something else in the IT team. So we're seeing that customers are telling us that security events are cut down from hours or even days down to minutes, which is a really powerful capability. So I think what's really important for Rubrik is to make sure that this isn't just a short-term fix for what our customers are saying is a problem now. We have 4 key areas as an organization that I think it's worth sharing with you on, which is really where we're going as an organization. The first is data visualization, to give you more beautiful visuals from the data that we're protecting. The second is to expand that capability into where our customers are driving forwards with cloud, and particularly 365 and SaaS. The third is around data security, and this was always our first principle when it came to building a new modern backup platform, was to build in the immutability, build in the security first approach, and that will always be a key focus for us as an organization. And the last is that single click recovery, but particularly for disaster recovery, and ransomware being the new disaster focus. So we do have an event coming up later this month, and I think it's worth just sharing that with you. We're going to have quite a lot of focus, particularly on the first day, on the 18th of May. We have a lot of security focus, and particularly there's a CISO session in the morning, which I think would be worth sharing with you. So do register for the event. It's at forward.rubrik.com if you haven't seen it. It's our annual virtual event for customers. So lastly, I've talked a lot about ransomware, but I think it's really important that we listen to our customers about what's important. And what our customers are telling us is that ransomware is one of the most important things to the board, in particular, 10 times the DR concern at the board of directors level. And I think that's just because how prevalent ransomware is and how it's grown. So I'm going to hand over to Chris now. If there's any questions in the meantime, do post them up in the Q&A.
Thanks, Phil. Every time you do that demo, you steal even more of my thunder. Sorry, every time you do that deck, you steal even more of my thunder. So thanks for that. So I'm just going to run you through a quick demo this morning of Radar and Sonar. I'm also conscious of time, but the great thing is about these demos is because it's nice and simple and very quick to use. We don't need a lot of time actually to take you through the demo. So hopefully you can see the screen okay. To start with, we'll look at Radar. So as Phil mentioned, Radar is this capability to analyze the backups that you've got, look at the behavior of file changes, and be able to plot trends and look at things that are anomalous. And it is very important, just to kind of reiterate the point of being able to integrate with other line of business applications that you might have. So if we take XOR, Cortex XOR as an example, you see our solution down here. So we can create a new incident within Cortex XOR if we spot something within Radar or Sonar. And that's really important because it helps to not only add value to the existing investments that you've got, but also, as Phil says, give you that kind of end-to-end automation that can really reduce the amount of time it takes to get back on your feet again. So if we look at the GPS dashboard, it's a pretty standard view and one you're probably very familiar with. So you see we've got this panel here on the right-hand side where we've got a couple of anomaly events detected by Radar. So if we drill into that, this takes us through to the events page, a filtered view of the events page. Again, fairly common to people that have used Rubrik before. But if we drill into this alert and we have a look at it, straight away we can start looking at the visuals of what's been going on with this backup and why we think it represents suspicious activity. So we can look at the plot lines here, and we can see that there have been a number of modified files, but generally speaking, that tends to follow a fairly regular, predictable pattern. So there's nothing about that pattern that we would necessarily raise any alerts on. But then we see quite a high number of deleted and created files, and also suspicious as well. And Vil's already mentioned kind of how we determine what we think is suspicious and what is kind of not. The rest of the alert is fairly standard stuff. So when we detected it, the event category, which particular rubric cluster it was on, what object type was it? In this particular case, it's a vSphere virtual machine, and we've got some pretty high confidence that there's some encryption gone on within this backup set, and it's something that we need to investigate. So what we can do very quickly is to click on the investigate snapshot button, and we can then start to dive in, and we can walk the file system, and we can look at what's actually happened within this backup set that's triggered this alert. So you see here, we've got these color-coded change boxes. So a number of files have been added, a number have been deleted, a number have been modified. But out of that, we reckon there's probably about 1,400 that are suspicious. So as with all the screens within the Polaris interface, we've got this ability to filter out the most important signals that we've got, which are obviously the suspicious ones. And then we can start to walk the file system, and we can start to look at what's the most important data that we need to get back, and how we're going to do that. So we can start looking into these file shares, and we can see already there are a lot of encrypted files within here flagged as suspicious. So we've clearly got a problem that we need to resolve. So there's a number of different ways of doing this. If we go into recover a full snapshot, we can then start walking through the recovery wizard, and we can make a decision about how we want to put that data back. So as you'd expect, we've got a number of different options ranging from a granular file level or folder level recovery, as far as restoring the whole virtual machine. And then we've got different options within that as well. So what we can do is we can restore files in folders from this snapshot. So if we dive in here, and we already know which particular files we want to recover, because the thing is with typical ransomware recovery, in order to get back to a place where you can continue operations again, normally you would just have to replace the whole thing, or you'd have to do it at a disk level, which means you're burning time putting back OS files that are really just something that we can put back from a CD or whatever. It doesn't really matter. The most important thing in the value is more around the actual data that we've got in the files. So as we look down the list of files we got within the backup, it's really easy for us to select individual files, individual folders, put those back and save time. Time's the key, probably more than anything else. But if I go back to the wizard and look at this again, sorry, let me just jump back. And investigate the snapshot as we did. Let me dive in here. Let me filter out suspicious. And then we did recover full snapshot. The other options we've got include creating a new virtual machine from this snapshot. So we can just put it back where it came from. Even one particular use case may be if your environment's been compromised and you don't feel happy that putting it back into the existing infrastructure wouldn't have the same problem again, then what you could potentially do is you could take that exported image and you could restore that into AWS, for example. So you got VMware and AWS. You could also convert that from a VMDK into an AMI, for example, and you could provision a kind of skeleton infrastructure in the public cloud and be able to get up and running again while you deal with the on-prem issues. So we can create a new virtual machine from this snapshot. We can do a live mount, so we can create a new virtual machine from this snapshot, and the recovered virtual machine uses the Rubrik cluster as its data store. We can mount virtual disks from the Rubrik cluster, and we can do an instant recover where we're literally just completely overwriting the old virtual machine with the one from the backup. So you see you've got various different options. Again, it's entirely up to you how you want to handle that recovery. And this is all scriptable, as we mentioned, through the likes of Cortex. So you don't need to be in a position whereby if you've got siloed sort of security teams, you need to be able to give the security operations team access to Rubrik. You can just get them to do that through the tool that they're most comfortable with, which would usually be something like Cortex XO. So from a radar point of view, I mean, that's as far as the demo kind of goes, because as I said, it's a relatively straightforward, simple process. You are basically picking the alert from the dashboard. You are then walking the file system to see what's being compromised, and then you make the decision about what you want to restore, where you want to restore it to, and then off you go. So the mean time to recovery using radar is actually very, very low. And as we said, this is kind of the key to making a recovery. So just switching tack, sorry, the Zoom bar's in the way. So just switching tack into Sonar now. So radar and Sonar are very complementary technologies in the sense that radar, you see, is looking for file anomalies and giving you the ability to roll back to a known good backup set and be able to recover very, very quickly. And what Sonar does is it works in conjunction with radar to analyze your backup sets and basically map out what sensitive data you've got and where it's kept. Now, some of that probably won't come as much of a surprise to you. You know, there'll be data in file shares that you will not be surprised to know that that's where it lives. But then you may also be surprised to learn that you've got some credit card details, as Phil mentioned, or some other personally identifiable information in places that it shouldn't be. So one of the key things to keep in mind about Sonar is this is very much an unstructured data product. Structured data like databases, etc. You've got other means to interrogate those, you know, very kind of mature, robust tools, Power BI, for example, and other such tools. But kind of 80% of the world's data is in unstructured data form. So kind of, you know, data buckets, file shares, even on local drives of things. And what Sonar allows us to do is use the spare compute within the Rubrik cluster to analyze these file sets. And then, as I said, map out what data we've got within which files on which virtual machines or whatever, and then give you a good sense as to what PII you're holding. And if you do get compromised, kind of what's been, you know, liberated, what's potentially out there in the open. And when you notify your data commissioner, you can give them really kind of granular information as to what the attack looks like. So diving back into the Polaris console again, this is the same view as we had before. The slight difference with Sonar is you get to it through this waffle menu. So if you click on the top right, you see you've got the Sonar tile here. So if you click on that, that will take you through to the Sonar console. Again, the whole, or one of the key benefits of Rubrik is the simplicity of the interface. So it's not complex, it's not difficult to learn. It's very intuitive when you land on it, and it makes it very quick to be able to look at the results of what we found and kind of make sense of it in your environment. So within the Sonar dashboard, we can see we've got, in this particular case, 156,000 sensitive hits. And we can hover over these charts and we can look at the breakdown of what those findings actually represent. So in this particular case, you see within the 146,000 sensitive hits, we have a lot around Ohio PII, which might seem like a slightly random thing, but Ohio PII was chosen because we had a customer that had a particular requirement, so that's now baked into the product. We've also got US PII policies, HIPAA, CCPA, which is the California GDPR, if you will, UK PII, PCI DSS, and other US financials. So Sonar is a relatively new product. So because of that, it's kind of an ongoing process to build out these policies and build out these analyzers, and I'll show you what they are in a minute. But over time, obviously, you'll see a lot more being added. And as we get further into it, whatever PII represents important information for Finland, that will be added as well. And then you'll see this within this chart. But another key thing about the visual you see here is at the side of the sensitive hit counter, you can see a little trend bar as well. So you can see we're trending up here as well. So we're actually collecting more and more PII. We're not actually reducing that amount. Now, the important thing to note about these, the sensitive hits, is it doesn't necessarily represent a problem. You've got to be able to interpret these numbers in the right way. So 147,000 sensitive hits just means you've got a lot of PII, and you can map out where it is. But when you actually look at the results of that, you may be comfortable with it because it's in places where it should be, in file shares or wherever that might be. So don't kind of get worried by big numbers or trends and things like that. It's just Sonar is going to help you map out, as I said, the kind of the data landscape within your environment, so you know where everything is. As we move into a couple of these other charts, you can see here we've got files with sensitive hits and open access. So as well as collecting information about the files and contents within, we also collect things like ACL information, so NTFS permissions. We can look within that. Files with sensitive hits, anything with PII within it. So we've got 7,000 files nearly. And then we've also got stale files with sensitive hits. So typically, as you know, data tends to be hot for around a month, maybe 2 months, probably not much more than that. But over time, a lot of these stale files will accumulate, but it will still have public, personally identifiable information within it. So what's a stale file? These are files that have not been accessed in over a year, and it almost kind of represents a blind spot within the environment. This at the moment, as you can see from the bubble, it's files that are over a year, but in upcoming releases, this is going to change. So you will have the ability to determine what you class as stale information and what isn't, essentially. So as we move to other parts of the console, you see here some top risk objects. These represent virtual machines. We've also got policies and analyzers, which I'll get to in a second. So you'll see that the sorts of trends that you've got within these particular policies, within these analyzers. So just to quickly explain the difference between the two, an analyzer is an individual object that represents a string of text within a file. So if you look at an example here, you've got US phone number, you could have social security numbers, it could be a customer number, for example, something that's unique to you, it could be a passport number, like a medical number, whatever. So an analyzer represents, one particular piece of data. Now, what a policy is essentially a bundle of these analyzers put together based around a common theme. So for example, with the policies, you've got Ohio PII, US PII, HIPAA, etc. Those policies are made up of analyzers that are specific to that particular area. So for example, if we had Finland PII, within that we would have several analyzers that would look at things like social security numbers, passport numbers, medical numbers, those sorts of things as well. And you could either build them out yourself, or you could wait until they get put into the product. But if we quickly dive into one of these findings, again, the interface is very, very similar to Radar. We can walk the file system. We can look at sensitive hits within this, which files have got which data in them. And as we start walking through, you can see the breakdown on the right-hand side here of these different hits and where they've come from. We can filter down by the different policies as well. And we can see which files have got which hits in them, and we can look within these files and see what's going on within that. We can preview within it, so we can see, actually that's going to time out because I'm not on the VPN. But what we can do with this is when we click on the file name, it'll give us essentially like a peek inside the file. We can see where we identified the text, and if it's like a massive spreadsheet, it's going to help you find out where that's come from. So as we walk through the file system, you can see here we've got all the different counters, and here's a really interesting example that we've got in here in program files, which seems a strange place to have it, files with sensitive hits and open access. So that's kind of, as an administrator, that's kind of piqued my interest. So I'm going to walk this file system and I'm going to follow this. And there's actually 2 hits for Ohio PII within the VMware folder, which seems a really strange place to kind of get that sort of information. So we keep walking the tree. And as we get further into it and we can start looking down the list, there's some license information that has Ohio PII embedded within this VMware tools directory. Now, that isn't something we would expect to find. That's not kind of normal behavior. VMware tools is just that. It's just a bunch of tools within VMware, within the guest operating system that talk back to the host, that talk back to vCenter. So we wouldn't expect personal information to be held in a location like that. But the worrying thing about this is the fact that not only is this file in here, but if we look at the access control list and the NTFS permissions, everyone has read and execute rights to this file. So as well as being in the wrong place, it actually has way more permissions than it actually requires. So that's something that we would need to take account of as well. So I mentioned analyzers and policies. So I've kind of described what they are. There are a number of analyzers and policies that are built into the product from the get-go. So within this, you'll see, as I mentioned, it tends to be a little bit US centric at the moment. CCPA, the GDPR for California, HIPAA for health services, PCI DSS is probably the most appropriate one, I guess, to you guys at the moment. So as we talk about analyzers and policies, it's really easy to create your own analyzer. So you see there's a whole list of predefined ones. So these are in the product already. And these are ones that, that have been tested and validated by us, that will have things like the Loon algorithm, if it needs to be checksummed or anything like that, within these different analyzers. But you can write custom ones as well. So if I wanted to do that, it's very simple. I could just give it a name. Test. And then I can use one of 2 ways of basically pulling that information out. So I can use a regular expression or a regex, and this is a type of format that you would put in here. I can also use a dictionary as well. So if I've got a long list of information that I want to be able to query within a file for, as you see here, these are sorts of names, but it could be anything. We have one customer at the moment who uses it for clear text passwords and kind of common passwords that may be held within a file. And they got something like 7,000 hits, which was really interesting. But just to quickly look at what a regex looks like. So if you're familiar with regular expressions, you'll kind of know what this is. So we're looking for particular digits on a scale of 0 to 9. There should be a 13 digits long, and then that's where we end the string. So this is looking for American Express, which always start with 47. But we've also got a dictionary as well if there was a particular credit card number we wanted to look for, if there's like a corporate credit card or something like that. So once we've kind of got those analyzers built and we've got them the way we want them, what we can do is then build those within a policy. So as well as the inbuilt ones that we've got here, so you'll see there's a number of custom ones that have already been built within this. We can actually create our own new one as well. So we create a new policy, we pick which analyzers we want to use. So we'll just pick a couple of these at random, click on next, give it a name, give it a description, and save it, and then that's pretty much it. So when the Rubrik cluster then has a little bit of free compute, and it's not doing backups, because backups will always get prioritized, that's when we will analyze the data set and we will look for these bits of information. So just to jump onto the rest of the console, and I'm just kind of conscious of time as well, we're getting close to the top of the hour. The events page, pretty much as you would expect, is a list of everything that the Sonar engine is doing. So dates and times and the classifications that have run, and the policies that have run within that. So you can track what's going on within that particular environment. In terms of reports, we can create custom reports within here. This is a subject access request, and we can then start really then drilling down into the information that we've got. So if an individual comes along and has a subject access request and says, "Can you give me all the information that you hold about me?" We can use the reporting functionality to drive that out. So let's say, for example, Valtteri Bottas, and I know we always pick on him, which is unfortunate, but if he says, what information do you have about me? You can create a report looking for that string of text or looking for particular information about him, and reporting is how you would do that. You can then save that report, send it back to him and say, this is all the information we hold. Is there anything that we need to do with this information? And then finally, there's the on-demand. So what we can do is run a classification immediately if we've got an auditor in, if we quickly need to provide information back to a central body, government body or legal team or whatever it might be. We can come within here, we can run a very quick on-demand classification, much the same process again. So we select one of the predefined policies, or we can create a custom analyzer, walk through the wizard, set that going, and then we can get results back in a fairly short order. So in terms of the demo, as I said, I'm just conscious of time. So I mean, that's at a very high level, radar and sonar. I know I've kind of walked through this quite quickly, but hopefully you've seen that the interface itself is very clean, very intuitive, very easy to navigate. And the whole key, again, is really the mean time to recovery. How quickly can we put this data back after a ransomware breach? And how can we also know with a high degree of certainty what PII we've got, where it's held, and has it possibly been compromised? So with that, back to Sami.
Will, do you have anything closing?
I have one question. This is Christian. I get this question quite often that what should you do if there is like a GDPR question and some employee or a customer says that what information do you have on me, or I want my data to be erased from your systems. Could you build a policy, put my name there, and find everything you have on those?
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's a really good question, actually, Christian. So as Chris was showing you the on-demand scans, you have the ability to search for a dictionary lookup. So we can put Christian Salo in the dictionary lookup, and maybe we can also put Chris Salo in there because maybe your name is in there in different formats. And we can pull out all of the systems that hold data that mention your name. We could also, if you were at a university, maybe we would search by your student record ID. If you were in a hospital, maybe we would search by your patient ID, or if you're a retailer, maybe we would search by your customer ID. So each of those identifiers might be unique to the organization. We can then provide a report, as Chris has shown, that says, here's a subject access request report. It shows all the systems that contain data about Christian. And then we can offer to either delete your name from those systems, if it was a right to be forgotten request, as an example under GDPR, or it may just be that, there's a HR investigation going on and you want to see all of the data that mentions you as part of that. I think it's a very common question that we get. And often it's a common question because today customers are doing this manually. So, I would probably, out of 10 customers, we would probably see 9 or 10 would be doing this manually. And often they have dedicated teams for their compliance to Freedom of Information Request Acts or GDPR subject access requests, right to be forgotten. They have dedicated individuals spending all of their time, or 90% plus of their time, doing this manually. So going through systems. And what Sonar gives you is that capability to very quickly look at, the unstructured data, which is not very easy to search. It's not databases. It's not something that's sitting in an Exchange mailbox or an email environment. So this is the data which is difficult to discover through, and that's how we would do that.
Cool, thank you.
Okay, that's it from us. Hopefully, hopefully we've given you the ability to see you can early detect, recover, and report on which sensitive data was involved in a ransomware attack. We also have shown you exactly how easy it is to use the platform. It's all HTML based, web browser based driven, and API driven. So with that, Sami and Christian, over to you guys. I think that concludes the session.
Thank you.